A bracing wind swept across the deck of the Seahawk, as Robb Stark stood beside Lord Christopher Byron, gazing northward at the gray-green ribbon of the Bight. Winterfell lay far behind them, yet in his mind the wolf banner ever fluttered. Below, the oarsmen strained, their relieved prayers rising in a chorus that echoed against the hulls of the allied fleet. 3 squadrons strong, bearing the sigils of Stark, Tully and Valerion in proud harmony. Robb had not meant to command ships. His fate lay in steel and honor on solid ground. But necessity had a way of steering men toward unfamiliar seas. After the Battle of the Whispering Woods, word reached him of children's bones washing ashore below White Harbor. Raiders, men loyal to the Ironborn, had slain innocents in pillage and feared flight. Though the North had no armada, his mother had. Catelyn's heart still bent toward any who might aid her son's cause. It was Lady Naval Valerion who first sailed down the Tully's river waters, offering Lord Hoster's kin the salt-borne power of Driftmark. Now in the dawn's growing light, Robb stood upon this strange triad of carvels and cogships, feeling the spray at his feet. Beside him Lord Ormond Valerion, his silver-gold hair streaming in a gale, offered a curt nod. "The Iron Fleet grows restless. Your sister's ships will be eager to test your mettle." His voice carried the faint lilt of the seas, tempered by command. "Harrenhal may be yours, but the true test lies in these tides." Robb's gray eyes narrowed. He thought of his fallen brothers, Bran broken beyond healing, and Rickon, safe yet far on Skagos, and of his bannermen in the north, whose loyalty burned like the hearth-fires at Winterfell. He thought of Edmure's match to Roslyn, and the delicate dance of alliances that bound the Riverlands by blood. And he thought of the brides they had yet to wed for the harbor's strength. This naval pact would secure his rear, forcing Frey to look seaward as well as southward. "My lord," Catelyn's voice drifted from the quarterdeck, soft but urgent. She had insisted on accompanying him, despite Sir Roderick's objections. She wore no armor, yet carried herself with such determination that even the Ironborn might hesitate. "The free cities have offered mercenaries. Sellsail brings promise, but loyalty is tempered with coin." Across the water, gulls swooped low, crying their ancient dirge. "Would it not serve us better to draw from Dorne? They have wary neutrality, but swords are swords." He glanced at her, astonished by the calm confidence in her eyes. She shaded her own thoughts with that protective grace he knew since childhood. "My lady, if I venture south for Dornish spears, the Freys will seize this moment. The Red Wedding." The words tasted bitter before he could finish. She understood without strike of speech. The twins, emboldened by his absence, would betray him again unless watchful eyes stayed upon them. "The Ironborn hold sway at Pike," Catelyn reminded. "If you bind with the Valerians, you bind with a family older than Dane Steel. Their reach extends across the Blackwater and the narrow sea. The Freys will think twice if they fear a fleet at their throat." Robb inhaled, tasting salt and promise. The Red Wedding, the very name stung like a fresh wound. Here on this vessel, he felt distance, yet the threat hovered as surely as the gulls above. He had vowed vengeance for Catelyn's betrayal, and for the slaughter of Tully kin. No castle wall could stand against an armada manned by loyal Northmen and shrewd Valyrian stock. If he forged this alliance swiftly, the Freys and the Boltons would find themselves trapped on an island of treachery. "Then let us set sail for Driftmark," he decided. The words held finality. Under his command, the helm spun, and the Seahawk's prow turned west, toward the glittering spires of Driftmark on the horizon. Lady Naval will have her answer. Sunlight glinted off opalescent scales as the Seahawk rode the tide into the Valerian estuary. The harbor itself was a labyrinth of piers and reefs, protected by cursed stones half submerged. 100 galleys and cogs lay moored, their banners snapping in the breeze. Arms of sea lords, merchants, and free men who answered the hornery cry. As Robb's flagship passed between the gray-cobbled docks, sailors of Driftmark sprang aboard with deft grace, securing lines and chanting greetings. At the gangplank, Robb disembarked into a world of salt-washed marble. Groves of black-leaf trees rustled in hanging terraces, and in the distance a great castle rose, a fortress that dared the storms. There, astride a polished bench, sat Lord Corliss Waters, Lady Niva's steward. The old man's gaunt features betrayed a life lived by ship's compass and keel. He rose, lifting a wrinkled hand in salute. "You honor us, Lord Stark," he rasped. His voice was waterlogged from years at sea. "My lady awaits. Follow the tide pools to the vantage terrace." They crossed a courtyard of black and white cobblestone, laid in a pattern evoking rolling waves. Gentle fountains whispered, feeding lilies and seaweeds in shallow basins. Here, the hush of the sea felt distant, muffled by granite ramparts. Robb thought how different this was from Winterfell's Starkstones and roaring hearths. Catelyn followed closely, watching the throng of waiting soldiers. Valyrian knights clad in teal and silver, their faces grim with duty. They ascended a narrow spiral stair hewn from living rock, each step worn by generations of sailors garbed in salt. At the top, a colonnade opened onto a platform 50 feet above the churning bay. The expanse of the narrow sea spread before them, a steel-gray mirror fractured by whitecaps. A lone galley drifted beyond, its oars stilled like the hands of some ancient clock. Lady Naval Velaryon stood before a carved dais of driftwood and rune-carved stone. Her presence was regal, despite the braid of dark hair pulled back into a warrior's knot. She wore a simple surcoat embroidered with the ancient sigil of the sea dragon, its body coiling around a trident. In her hand she held a shell, an oyster as large as a clenched fist. She turned as they approached, and her pale blue eyes observed Robb with the intensity of a hawk. "King in the North," she intoned, voice unwavering. "You come seeking alliance." She paused, letting the wind catch her words. "But alliances are wrought with iron and blood. Tell me." "The Freys and Boltons have spilled brothers' blood." "How shall I know you will not abandon us when the storm breaks?" Robb drew a measured breath. Here, before the sea's mistress, he would forge a bond that could reshape the war. He recalled Catelyn's counsel. "Speak truth, even when it pains." "My mother fell victim to their treachery," he began, voice firm. "My bannermen bled in their halls. I offered death to those who wronged me, and life to those who stand with me now. In exchange, I ask the strength of your fleet to carry me across these seas, beyond the neck, so that no man may betray me in song or story again." Nevia's lips curved in something almost like approval. Her gaze shifted to Catelyn, whose expression was resolute. "You have won my ear," the lady said. "But what of the Ironborn? Euron Crow's fleet prowls these waters. Will you stand against him, as you stood against Bolton Steel?" "Lender." Robb squared his shoulders. "I will. As my bannermen fight for Winterfell's honor, I will fight for Driftmark's safety. Let our banners sail side by side. Let the world learn that the North and the Valyrians share more than trade. They share blood, and if Euron Crow comes, we shall drown him in his own dark tide." A hush followed, broken by the distant cry of seabirds. Then Lady Nevaeh nodded, raising the oyster shell to her lips. She crushed it between her fingers, and a single pearl slipped free, glinting like the moon on storm-tossed waves. "So be it, Robb of House Stark," she declared. "We bind oath in pearl and tide. Sail with me to war, and I shall sail with you to victory." Below, 1,000 oars dipped, and crows' nests emptied as sailors cheered. Robb felt Catelyn's hand on his arm, and for a moment, the weight of kingship lifted from his shoulders. Here, in the gleaming air above the sea, he tasted hope. Yet in the east, the bells of the twins tolled in solemn lament. The Red Wedding would come, history warned. But perhaps now its shadow would be broken by naval flames and shores awash in steel. Robb Stark, king in the north, had forged a pact with the mist and salt of the dawn, and the world would tremble at the thunder of his fleet. Pan? Robb Stark felt the tremor beneath his feet, before he saw the flicker of sails on the horizon. From the deck of the Seahawk, he watched as the iron-gray shapes emerged through a rising mist, each hull a jagged claw against the dawn light. The Valyrian fleet held steady at his back, their banners snapping like flagstones in the wind. But here, on these open waters, he alone would test the mettle of his new allies. Men of the north, he called through the bullhorn, voice carrying over the spray. Steel your hearts. The Ironborn come for blood and plunder. We will give them neither. A roar answered him, a chorus of oars beating in the water, and steel kissing steel, as the Stark men donned hauberks and hefted round shields. Catelyn stood at his side, cloak whipping about her, eyes aglow with fierce pride. Behind them, Lord Ormond and Lady Nevaeh conferred in low tones, but Robb did not doubt their resolve. By the time Euron Greyjoy's flagship, the Silence, crested the waves, the Allied line had formed a crescent that spanned the width of the bay. The Silence's black sails were like tears in the sky, its iron prow carved into a snarling kraken. Euron himself stood at the stern, pale hair plastered to his skull, one gleaming eye fixed upon Robb as though the young king were a worm to be speared. "Stark," Euron bellowed, voice amplified by war horns. "Did you bind yourselves to driftwood and rotting oars? This is no wedding feast, crow's meat. This is the tide you cannot swim." Robb's hand went to the hilt of his sword. He stepped forward, shield raised. "I am no crow, Greyjoy," he replied, steady as the horn that summoned his bannermen. "I am the king in the north, and these men sail under my command. You will turn back to Pike, or we will send your ships to the bottom." A savage grin flickered across Euron's face. He raised a curved blade, etched with runes older than the conquest. "I will dance on your grave, wolf boy. My krakens will feast on your bones." At his signal, a bolt of flaming pitch arced from the Silence's deck. Robb braced as it screamed toward the Seahawk, but before it struck the water, a volley of Valyrian archers met it in flight. The missile exploded in a gout of flame half a ship's length from Robb's prow, sending a wave of heat across the deck. The men staggered, but held their ground. Robb raised his sword high. For Winterfell, for Driftmark, for every man who would sail with treachery in his heart, off with them. Boom! The battle joined in a thunderous clash. The Seahawk rammed the Silence's starboard flank, metal shearing metal in a screeching wail. Oars splintered, men cried out, and salt water mixed with blood as the vessels locked together. Robb leapt across the gap between decks, boots thudding against foreign wood. He landed in a spray of seawater and struck down the first Ironborn he saw, a broad-shouldered warrior with a jagged helm, his axe raised in mid-swing. The blade bit between ribs. The man crumpled with a gurgled curse. Catelyn followed close behind, blade flashing as she parried a second attacker, then drove her dagger beneath his corselet. She turned, eyes blazing, to face Euron himself as he stalked toward them, gait slow and predatory. "You," Robb snarled, "die for your crimes against the innocent." Euron laughed, voice like grinding stone. "Your innocence got you this far, Stark. You are still a child playing at kingship." In that instant, Robb saw his mother's face, stolid, unwavering. Through the gleam of blade and salt, he lunged, guard low, and the two men's swords met in a shower of sparks. Euron's weapon rang cold steel against hot. The impact sent shockwaves up Robb's arm. He kicked the Kraken helm off Euron's head, then ducked under a slash that cleaved the deck plank in two. He drove his shoulder into Euron's chest, sending the Ironborn lord stumbling backward onto the deck. Before Euron could recover, Robb's sword arced in a killing blow. The point buried itself in Euron's breastplate, and with a strangled cry, the Black Fleet's terror crashed to its knees. The Silence rolled in the swells and then keeled sideways, water flooding its holds. Men on all sides froze as the flagship dipped beneath the waves, dragging half a dozen lesser vessels down with it, like drowned rats. On the Seahawk, Robb withdrew his blade and wiped it on Euron's frozen cloak. He looked up at the eastern sky, streaked with blood-red dawn, and felt the thrill of victory surge through him. Yet even in triumph, he knew this battle was but the first chord in a symphony of war. When the last of the Silence's remnants sank, the Allied flotilla erupted into cheers. Valyrian trumpets blared. Stark hornmen called the charge. Tully war drums pounded a victory march. Catelyn clasped his arm, voice ringing with pride. "They will think twice before crossing us again." He nodded, catching his breath. "But the phrase will never know hesitation," he murmured. They will press their advantage at the twins. We have little time. Lady Naval, hair matted with foam, surcoat torn, strode to his side, eyes alight with the fire of a sea storm. By midday, we can command 3,000 oarsmen and 100 galleys. The narrow sea opens before us. Shall we sail to the twins together, or will my fleet serve merely as cannon fodder to your land armies? Then so. Robb's gaze swept the horizon, picturing the green waters of the Green Fork, as they flowed past the stones of the twins. He thought of Lothar Frey's face, graven with ambition, and of Roose Bolton's thin smile. They would not be prepared for a siege from the water, for the swollen riverlands would become an isle. We sail at first light, he declared. Bring every ship to bear on the twins. We will blockade the river, cut off King's Landing supplies, and force them into submission, or starvation. Damn? Lady Naval enclosed her hands around the pearl she wore now on a chain. Then let us feast on the blood of traitors. Under the cover of darkness, the Allied fleet slipped from Driftmark's harbor, like a pod of leviathans stirring in deep water. Lanterns glowed at every oarbox. Torches burned at bow and stern. The sea was alive with shadows and the promise of vengeance. Robb stood at the prow of the Seahawk, cloak drawn tight against the damp chill, as the wind carried him westward toward the heart of treachery. Caitlin joined him, her breath visible in the night air. Do you think they will bring hostile to heel, or will they surrender when they see the might you command? He pondered the thought. The twins were known for their stone architecture and their cunning, but they had no navy. Their sole line of defense was the river crossing itself. Two great towers bridged by wooden walkways. If the water behind them ran red, the Freys would be trapped. They will sally out at dawn to test our strength, he replied. But when they find only steel and fire, they will know that their cause is lost. Caitlin pressed his arm. Remember to show mercy, Robb. Mercy inspires loyalty. Vengeance drives men to desperation. He nodded, recalling tales of his father's mercy in the red wine raids. I will temper my wrath, he promised. But mercy for the worthy. No quarter for traitors. She smiled through concern. Wise, as always. A faint glow shimmered beyond the mist. The torches of the twins lit warning to the countryside. Behind them, small fishing vessels fled upriver, laden with families clutching what few belongings they could carry. Robb felt a stab of pity, but steeled his heart. War spared none, and his cause was just. He turned to Lady Naval. Signal the armada. At dawn, we pounce. She raised a conch shell to her lips and blew, a deep, resonant note that shook the Blackwater. The fleet answered in kind, and the sound rolled like thunder across the river. As the echo died, Robb Stark looked southward, toward the land where his mother and his bannermen waited in hope and fear. He felt the weight of his crown as heavy as the oars in his hand, and he vowed, for every broken vow, for every blood oath ripped to tatters, that he would not fail them again. The last echo of the conch faded, and with it, the twilight of treachery. Dawn would come, and with it, the king in the north and his allied host. The red wedding would be unmade. The realms of men would tremble before the fleet he commanded, and the song of his vengeance would ring across sea and shore. And so, in the darkness before battle, Robb Stark, a wolf riding the waves of war, prepared to strike at the heart of betrayal. The tide was his to command, and the fate of kingdoms would be written in salt and steel. The first hint of dawn stained the river's surface, a dull crimson, as the Allied fleet crept upriver toward the twins. Oars bit into glassy water, each stroke measured and silent, as if the rowers feared to wake the misbegotten fortress they approached. Robb Stark stood at the prow of the lead galley, the Seahawk's prow cutting a steady line through the mist. In the wan light, the two great towers of the twins rose like sentinel giants, their broad stone walls bridging the Green Fork, flanked by piles of empty, creaking rafts and merchant wagons. Behind him, the roar of oars was muffled beneath a tense hush. On his right, the Valerian triremes gleamed, slender, swift vessels built to harness wind and tide, while to his left, The heavy northern cogs bristled with spearmen and archers. Caitlin Tully, grim-faced but resolute, conferred in low tones with Lord Edmure by the rail. Every man aboard knew this battle would decide the fate of their cause. If the twins fell, the Freys and their Bolton allies would be cut off from King's Landing, forced to capitulate or starve. As the first rays of sun pierced the mist, a lone warhorn blew from the eastern tower. Its note was long and mournful, echoing against the riverbanks. At once, torches ignited along the parapets, lining the walls in a grim beacon. Robb drew his sword, a simple, serviceable blade forged in Winterfell's smithies, and held it aloft. "Brothers," he called, voice rolling across the water, "today we avenge the blood of the innocent. We strike at traitors in their own halls. Let no man among us falter." 1,000 voices answered in thunder, oars dipping in unison. The line closed, and at Robb's command the Valyrians unfurled their lateen sails, harnessing a sudden gust to press the attack. Flaming arrows streaked overhead, clattering into wooden bulwarks and sending splinters into the river. Northern archers on the cogs returned fire, the shafts arcing like grim omens before burying themselves in stone or splintering into masonry. Where catapults could be found, mounted on rafts and barges, southern mercenaries, sellsails and sellswords, unleashed volleys of heavy stones. Each impact reverberated through the frozen air, dust plumed upward, revealing hidden defenders behind crenellations. From the river's edge, crossbowmen, taught at White Harbor's yards, picked off lookouts daring to peer over the walls. Slowly, inexorably, the waterborne siege pressed in. Below the eastern tower, where a narrow wooden jetty jutted into the river, Robb ordered boarding parties to anchor their grapnels and launch across. In tight formations, shields locked and swords drawn, his men leapt onto the jetty and surged forward. Granite steps led to a gatehouse backed by a stout portcullis. Frey pikemen met them there, a gaunt trench of bristling steel. Spears snapped against shields. Men fell on both sides, their yells swallowed by the towers. Robb fought at the vanguard, his blade flashing as he cleaved through cheekplate, his cloak streaked blood red by rising light. Above him, Valyrian marines swung onto the walls, clambering up roped ladders alongside scaled rungs. Lady Naval herself led them, her silver hair tied back, eyes alight with fervor. She dispatched a Frey knight with a single thrust, then turned to steady a faltering lad at her side. "Hold the line," she called, voice clear. "The North remembers." By the time Edmure Tully's reinforcements spilled through the gatehouse, the eastern tower was nearly overrun. Robb pressed upward through the narrow corridors, leaving death in his wake. All around, men fought in shadows, lit by torch and rising smoke. Somewhere ahead, the portcullis splintered with an ear-splitting crack, granting the Tully host entry to the inner bailey. Robb heard the clash of steel from the western wall, where Bolton mercenaries sought to plug the breach. He wheeled and rallied his men, cutting a corridor for Edmure's flood of spearmen. Within the courtyard, the Freys had gathered their banners, 20 in all, and made a desperate stand beneath a makeshift dais of felled timbers. Lothar Frey himself, clad in mail spattered with the blood of kin, flailed at any man who came near. Roose Bolton, pale and shadowed, directed archers from a flank, but the allied host pressed in around them, the ebb and flow of battle tilting ever in favor of the storm. Robb caught sight of Lothar's standard, a weeping willow bent in sorrow, and with a roar he charged. His blade danced a swift reckoning, cleaving through Bolton's carver before the knight could raise his shield. Lothar Frey stumbled back, breathless, clutching a bleeding side. Roose Bolton drew a cruel dagger and lunged, but Caitlin intercepted, driving him to the ground in a whirl of steel. The lords of treachery tasted fear as the crown's wrath descended. As the courtyard fell silent, save for ragged breathing, Robb strode to the dais. Lothar Frey lay on his face, hand still grasping the fallen standard staff. Edmure's men formed a loose ring, swords pointed inward. Robb's heart pounded, each beat like the hammer on his father's forge. He raised his blade, but did not strike. Instead, he sheathed it and summoned every ounce of his inheritance. "Lothar of the Crossing," he called, voice resonant. "You betrayed your oaths and murdered those who trusted you. Yet the North grants mercy to those who bend the knee. Swear your men to my service. Restore the hostages you took. If you refuse, your fate will be worse than death. You will starve behind these walls until nothing remains but bow." A hush fell. Lothar struggled, blood pooling beneath his cheek, but the point of Catelyn's dagger at his throat reminded him that mercy was a double-edged gift. He spat, but his pride doused in cold fear. I yield." His voice cracked like winter ice. "I swear fealty to King Robb Stark. I will restore every prisoner." Robb nodded. "Then take this oath, and let your men swear it likewise." He beckoned, and every banner in the courtyard sank in unison. The Frey lords and Bolton captains laid their swords at his feet. Beyond the walls, the Valyrian fleet cut away makeshift barricades from the riverbank, and the Blackwater's tide washed through the crossing unimpeded. Merchants and farmers, who had sheltered behind the stone, emerged, their eyes wide with astonishment at the swift downfall of the twins. Children clung to mothers' skirts. Old men dropped to knees to pray. In that moment, Robb understood the weight of command. He had delivered a people from terror, but the war was far from over. As banners were raised anew, Stark, Tully, Velaryon, Robb rode to the western tower's parapet. The sky overhead shimmered with the flight of ravens. He released two myself, watching as they soared toward Winterfell, a living summons. Soon, word would spread to his bannermen and allies across the north and riverlands. Below him, Edmure knelt amid Frey prisoners and offered words of comfort. Lady Nevaeh conferred with her captains, attention already on upriver shipments bound for King's Landing. Catelyn stood beside Robb, silent in relief. Robb turned to her. "We hold the twins," he said softly. "The Riverlands bend the knee, and the Ironborn fear our wrath. What remains is King's Landing." She smiled, a ghost of warmth after so many nights of fear. "And the Lannisters?" He clenched the hilt of his sword. "They stand with the crown, but without river traffic, their coffers will dry. We strike their gold and their lives. We march to King's Landing with fire and steel." Smoke curled from the twins' chimneys. Families streamed from their hovels, kneeling in prayer or raising pitying hands at the passing of the victors. Robb saw in their eyes hope reborn. He felt at once the weight of his father's legacy and the promise of his own reign. Behind him, the river's waters whispered, carrying the promise of war southward. The sound of splintered oars and shattered paddle echoed faintly, as if mourning the passing of the old order. Robb Stark, king in the north, had forged a navy and alliance with ancient sea lords. He had reclaimed the riverlands and crushed the treacherous Freys. Now the battlements of King's Landing awaited, their distant spires hazy on the horizon. He drew a deep breath of misty dawn air, tasting salt and victory. "Sound the horns," he ordered. "Let every man know that we ride for the capital. Let every soul tremble at the cry of the wolf and the song of the sea." Lenderwan. Across the courtyard, a horn archon raised his instrument and blew, a note like thunder rolling across water and stone. The allied trumpets joined, a herald of coming storm. The war drums of the north began to beat, slow and steady, each pulse a promise of conquest. In that moment, Robb Stark felt the current of fate at his back. No more would the red wedding stain his house with treachery. No more would his banners be betrayed in blood. The tide had turned, not merely in the river, but in the hearts of all who looked to him for justice. And so, under the rising sun of a new era, the king in the north and his allies set their sights on King's Landing, determined to end the war once and for all. The seas and rivers were theirs to command. The armies of the realm would fall before their fury. The Game of Thrones had changed, and Robb Stark would see his vengeance complete. The future was forged on mist and steel, and no man would stand in his way. A chill wind carried the salt of the narrow sea across the assembled host as dawn broke over the storm-blackened waters. Robb Stark stood on the quarterdeck of the Seahawk, the banner of House Stark snapping above him, and watched the river armada stretch behind him like a silvery serpent coiled for the strike. Beyond lay the broad plains of the Crownlands, the reach to the south, and at last, King's Landing itself, its golden roofs glinting through the morning haze like promises or lies. At his side, Caitlin Tully tightened her gauntleted fingers around the carved wolf's head pommel of her sword. "We stand at the cusp of history," she said, voice low enough that only he could hear over the creak of timber and the beating of oars. "Yet I fear the city's walls and its people will not yield to mere steel." Robb nodded, gaze fixed on the distant silhouette of Aegon's high hill. "We will give them more than steel," he replied. "We will offer them choice, bend the knee, or watch their city starve. The Tyrell grain, the Arbor's wine, the salt they need, all will be cut off by land and river. Their small folk will cry out for relief, and the lords of the city will have no choice but to sue for peace." "Ah." Caitlin's lips curved in a weary half-smile. "And if they refuse? Then we bring the war to their gates." Robb felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. "I will not rest until the Lannister lion is struck from the throne." Below them, the Allied ships shifted course into the wide bay between Blackwater Rush and the shores of the Stormlands. Velaryon lateen sails caught the breeze first, their graceful hulls dancing atop the waves. Stark cogs, broad and sturdy, formed a protective flanking line against any ironborn raiders who might yet dare to challenge them. Tully longships, sleek and narrow, skimmed the shallows at the river's mouth. From the Seahawk, Robb could see the first tenders, small fishing vessels drafted into service, maneuvering upriver to inform the citizens along the shore of the blockade. Carts and wagons, laden with grain and livestock, stalled at riverside hamlets. Farmers and shepherds cursed as the river boom halted their passage. Word of the Stark fleet's approach raced ahead of it, carried by the whispers of boatmen and the cries of panic-stricken merchants. As they drew nearer, the gray battlements of Stonedance, a minor stronghold south of the city, came into view. Its jagged towers bristled with archers, and flaming braziers along the ramparts cast an orange glow even in the rising sun. Robb raised his horn. "Send a messenger to the walls of Stonedance," he ordered. "Tell Lord Celtigar that House Stark has come in peace, bearing the offer of mercy to those who bend the knee, and of vengeance to those who do not." A bowman laid an arrow to his horn, then loosed. The horn dropped into the water and bobbed for a moment before sinking beneath the tide. A small boat from the Seahawk cut away from the column, approaching Stonedance's docks beneath a white banner of truce. Robb turned to Lord Ormond Velaryon, whose silver-gold braid glinted in the pale light. "If they refuse the offer, we take the castle by force?" Ormond's pale eyes simmered with loyal purpose. 100 galleys and cogs loom at their gates, and my marines wait in the shallows. At your signal, we destroy them like driftwood. "We begin with Stonedance," Robb affirmed. "Then by nightfall, we boast of our conquest to the gates of King's Landing." Lord Celtigar's black-veined envoy returned by mid-morning, bowed deeply before Robb, and conveyed his lord's capitulation. The castle would yield, sparing the small folk within. In return, Celtigar swore fealty to Robb Stark, bannerman of the North and the Riverlands. 2 hours later, Stonedance's gates clanged open, and Robb's host poured within. The arrival of Stark men was met with bowed heads and trembling hands. The castle's stores of grain and salted meats were turned over to the victors, not as spoil, but as ransom. Caitlin insisted that every mother and child be fed and sheltered, that the mercy granted by their banner be shown in full measure. By mid-afternoon, the conquered castle's towers flew the flapping sigils of 3 great houses, their own wolf, the leaping trout of Tully, and the coiling sea dragon of Velaryon. From the parapets, scouts spotted the massive walls of King's Landing rising beyond a pale green haze. Smoke curled from the rooftops. The great clay banks of Blackwater Rush gleamed. Farther south, the fields of the Crownlands stretched to the horizon, dotted with villages whose thatched roofs now lay silent. Robb disembarked the Seahawk and stood amid the throng of lords and captains on the foreshore. His leather jack was spattered with salt, his hair so damp it clung to his neck. Behind him, Caitlin cradled a child rescued from Stonedance's kitchens. Lady Naval Velaryon, sword in hand, gave orders to her captains for a river patrol to intercept any Lannister supply barges. Edmure Tully marshaled the river lords to secure farms and hamlets, cutting off every road into the city. Robb surveyed the scene with fierce satisfaction. "We press the advantage," he said. "Send envoys to the city walls. Offer King's Landing the same terms. Surrender and swear fealty, or we hold the supplies of the Reach and the Arbor as well. The people here will choose hunger or ruin. Better they fall on our mercy than starve under Lannister pride." Nender one shall. The Tully banners were sent first, then the Valyrian. Each messenger carried letters penned in Robb's own hand, firm, unwavering, yet laced with compassion for the innocent. "I, Robb of House Stark, King in the North and Lord of Winterfell, demand that the Lord of the Seven Kingdoms receive my terms by sunset. Let no man be harmed so long as the city's defenses stand down and the Crown's armies yield." And now, his words sailed into the city on white wings of hope. And yet, as the day trudged westward, news came that the city's Lord Commander, Sir Miles Mouton, had refused to parley, claiming loyalty to King's stony heart and to the gold that brewed within the Red Keep's vaults. The herald returned with a blade crooked across his throat. A message that defiance would be met with death. Robb's lips thinned. "Then we bring the siege." Night descended like a velvet cloak, pierced by the torches of siege engines drawn into position along the riverbank. Valyrian galleys anchored pendants of chain and booms to prevent any crossing of the rush. Stark cogs formed a floating barricade farther out, their bow-mounted catapults trained on the city walls. Tully longships, light and nimble, prowled the innermost channel, cutting off skiffs that might slip past. Amid the clamor, Robb held council in the great tent of the Seahawk, the first time he had slept apart from Catelyn since the war began. Lord Ormond and his captains arrayed maps of the river and the city. Sir Edric Storm offered reports of Lannister scouting parties. Catelyn pored over letters from his bannermen, assuring no man acted rashly. "The city's water supply travels through the aqueduct from the hills beyond," Edric observed. "If we sever that, they may soon parched." A fine smile curved Robb's mouth. "Do it." Lady Nivea's voice was calm as a falling leaf. "The tides will carry our longboats upstream. At low tide, we scale the aqueduct and collapse it. By dawn, no man in King's Landing will find fresh water." "Nebenpenhau." Catelyn's brow creased. "Smoke from the fires might poison the wells. We must ensure the city cannot blame us for disease among innocents." Robb nodded. "We will guard the septs and the temples. Let the septons tend to the wells below the city walls. We will provide fresh water to the small folk if they open the gates." A hush followed. Even the crackle of lamp oil seemed to hold its breath. At last, Lord Ormond spoke. "Then we move at midnight. Under a moon pale as ash, Starfall longships lifted from the docks in silence, clad in leathers dyed sea blue and oiled to a sheen. Valyrian marines clambered up the aqueduct's arches, unspooling ropes carrying iron wedges and sledgehammers. Below them, their comrades shattered the vault houses with trained axes, sending boulders crashing into the river. The structure trembled like a wounded beast, then collapsed in a thunder that rattled windows far within the city. Up on the walls, lights winked on. Lannister torches and the great hand's pyre atop the Red Keep. Alarm bells clanged as the aqueduct fell, drenching barons and merchants with icy spray. Soldiers poured onto the battlements, but the breach was already sealed with granite ruin. No water flowed. On the riverbank, Robb Stark blew his horn. Below him, a wave of Tully and Stark longboats pressed forward, disgorging spearmen and archers onto the sands before the walls. Catapults, blazing with pitch, hurled flaming shot high into the sky and let it plummet among the battlements. Banners of the North and Riverlands rippled, and a single horn atop the Westerling Gate called out hoarse warning. It was the prelude to war. Inside King's Landing, panic seized the small folk. They poured into the streets, clutching buckets and pitchers in vain. Children wailed. Mothers wept. Beggars fell to knees. The rich lit lamps within their manors, but water ran only muddy through the faucets. The gold within the Red Keep could not slake thirst. At daybreak, the city gates creaked open on their hinges. Robb Stark and his host stepped across the threshold beneath the banners of mercy. His blade remained sheathed. His wolf cloak hung loose. At the foot of the Red Keep steps, he paused, looking upon the sea gate's closed portcullis. Through the slit, he saw figures in crimson cloaks, the Lannister guard, forming ranks. Robb raised his hands. "Let no man strike," he commanded. "I come to offer mercy but not ignorance. Let the small folk enter the city. Let their voices be heard, and the lords of this place shall answer." A hush fell, deep as the river below. Behind him, Catelyn's hand found his, their fingers entwining. Lady Naval stood to one side, sword in scabbard, face unreadable as the sea at night. In that moment, Robb felt the weight of every oath he had sworn. From behind the gate, a single herald stepped forward, voice cracking beneath his helm. "My lord," he said, bowing low. "The Lady Myrcella Tyrell, on behalf of the small council and the crown, begs your mercy. They will receive your terms." Robb exhaled, feeling both relief and the sharp anticipation of what must come. "Then let the small council join me on the steps of the Red Keep," he declared. And so, with the small folk gathered behind them, and the Lannister banners lowered high above, Robb Stark, king in the north, rode into the heart of the Seven Kingdoms to remake its fate. The sea and river had carried him, but now it was the will of the people and the broken pride of fallen lords that would shape the next chapter. The Game of Thrones would bend to his decree, and through mercy or might, he would forge a peace beyond the shadow of treachery once and for all. The golden roofs of King's Landing glinted as he ascended the steps. Ahead lay the throne room, the iron seat, no longer unassailable. Ahead lay the promise of a new age, one born of salt and steel, of vengeance tempered by compassion, and of a king who had learned that mercy could be as fearsome as war. And the wolves that followed him would sing its song across river and sea. Ka-wa. Robb Stark paused on the worn sandstone landing before the gates of the Red Keep, the first pale light of dawn creeping over Aegon's high hill. Behind him, the small folk of King's Landing pressed forward on hungry feet, clutching empty vessels. Before him, the city's great crimson doors stood open at last. He inhaled the scent of salt and sweat and hope, then led the throng across the threshold into the shadowed streets. The golden sept spires rose before them, its septons already setting out bowls of fresh water and loaves of bread, offered freely to all who would kneel. Catelyn Tully followed close, bearing a child wrapped in a velvet cloak, one of many survivors of Stonedance whom she had insisted be brought to safety. Lady Naval Valerian strode at Robb's side, her eyes ever watchful for any sign of betrayal among the city's silent sentries, while Edmure Tully and Lord Ormond marshaled his captains to keep order. Through the winding lanes they passed, past shuttered shops and shuttered hearts, until at last they reached the sprawling square before the Dragon Pit. There, Robb Stark commanded the assembled smallfolk to halt. The storm-gray walls of the Red Keep loomed behind him, and atop its ramparts the red Lannister banners had been furled, their brazen lions subdued. In their place flew the white direwolf of the north, the silver trout of the Riverlands, and the sea-green dragon of Driftmark. From the steps of the Dragon Pit, a lone herald stepped forward, voice trembling beneath his helm. "My lord," he said, bowing, "the small council awaits you in the Sunfire Chamber. They stand ready to swear your terms." Robb nodded once, then strode between the ranks of commoners, every man and woman kneeling in reverent silence as he passed. Their eyes, once filled with fear, now burned with something fiercer, the sudden knowledge that power had shifted at last. At the great oaken doors of the Sunfire Chamber, he paused, hand on the iron ring. "Remember," Catelyn whispered at his shoulder, "now is the moment of kingship. Mercy for the worthy, justice for the guilty." He closed his eyes, thought of the blood shed at the Twins, the iron bolts that had sealed so many fates, and of his fallen brothers. Then he opened the door. Inside, the chamber blazed with torchlight. Around a high table sat the lords and ladies of the realm. Lord Paxter Redwine, still bearing the ash of his burned vineyard, Lady Rohan Weber clutching a folded letter from Storm's End, the High Septon himself, meek in robes of white, even the Lady Marjorie Tyrell, whose golden hair had lost its luster beneath worry's weight. At the head of the table, seated upon a carved chair of weirwood and ebony, was Sir Miles Mouton, no longer Lord Commander, but now simply a knight in service to the man he had once refused to face. Robb crossed the chamber in measured steps, cloak trailing behind like a wake. When he reached the dais, he raised his hand. "Men and women of the small council," he began, voice steady and clear. "I come to you not as a conqueror, but as your king and protector. I have torn the banners of treason from the twins, starved the gold of Lannister pride, and spared this city from ruin, so long as you bend the knee and swear fealty to House Stark." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Lord Mouton rose, white hair shaking. "My lord," he said, voice cracking, "the city is in your hands. We—" His words caught. Shame flickered in his eyes. "We will bend the knee." Robb inclined his head once. "Then let us seal this oath in blood and law. As king, I grant clemency to those who swore false vows, provided they renounce their claims and swear anew. All debts owed to the Iron Throne shall be forgiven, that trade in grain may flow once more. And to the small folk of this city, I promise peace, that no child shall go hungry while I sit the Iron Throne." Lady Tyrell stepped forward, her green eyes bright. "And the Lannisters?" Robb's gaze hardened. "The Lannisters shall answer for their crimes. House Lannister will be stripped of its lands and titles. Their soldiers may serve under me, but their lords will no longer hold sway." He drew a rolled parchment from within his cloak. "Here are the writs that name each new lord and lady of the 7 kingdoms. Let justice be done swiftly, that we may rebuild what treachery has torn asunder." For a moment the chamber was still. Then the High Septon stepped forward, voice trembling with solemnity. "By the grace of the 7, and by the will of the people, I crown you King Robb Stark, protector of the realm." 2 septons withdrew a silver circlet, etched with weirwood branches and Winterfell's direwolf. They placed it lightly upon his brow, and a hush fell as Robb Stark's eyes met Catelyn's across the hall. He felt the crown's weight, a promise more precious than any sword, and exhaled. Outside, the populace erupted in cheers so thunderous they shook the battlements. In the streets, torches flared, bells rang, and boys climbed upon carts to glimpse their new king. From the walls of the Red Keep came the clarion call of the Valyrian trumpets and the deep, sonorous toll of Winterfell's horn. That night, under a sky bright with torchfire, Robb Stark stood upon Aegon's high hill and looked out over a city reborn. Behind him, the builders began to dismantle racks where traders had swung. Before him, merchants stoked their fires once more. The air smelled of salt and smoke, and the promise of new beginnings. From the steps beside him, Catelyn placed her hand on his arm. "You have done what no Stark has done in living memory," she murmured. "You have brought the 7 kingdoms to heel beneath one banner." Robb turned, eyes shining. "We have done this together, and tomorrow we rebuild." Below, the bells of the Great Sept pealed in joyous chorus. Across the river, the Valyrian fleet lay at anchor in silent triumph. To the north, ravens winged toward Winterfell with news of peace. And in the heart of King's Landing, Unsa bastion of tyranny, Robb Stark, king of the north and protector of the realm, prepared to shape a new era where mercy and honor would stand as tall as the tallest tower. Thus began the reign of the Direwolf King, whose banners flew not only over Winterfell and the twins, but over a reunited 7 kingdoms, united at last by salt, by steel, and by the unbreakable bonds of loyalty. A.K.O. Robb Stark rose with the dawn's first light, standing atop the battlements of the Red Keep as the city stirred below. King's Landing wore a fragile peace. Market stalls creaked open, carts rumbled over cobblestones, and small folk queued at wells newly freed of siege's curse. Yet even in triumph, Robb knew the work of a true king had only begun. Below him, Catelyn Tully oversaw the distribution of seed grain from Stonedance's stores, ensuring each quarter of the city would receive its share before the next planting season. Lady Nevaeh Velaryon conferred with Ormond's captains on the docks, preparing patrols to guard against pirate raids and smuggling, and to secure the narrow sea lanes that now answered to Stark's banners. Edmure Tully marshaled the city watch, integrating former Lannister auxiliaries into a new guard sworn to protect the realm. Robb descended from the ramparts into the newly fashioned white council chamber. A wide hall draped in wolf gray and river blue, its long table carved from a single slab of Riverland's oak. Here, he had convened the first meeting of his small council. 3 representatives from each great region of the 7 kingdoms, chosen for wisdom and loyalty, rather than birth or blood alone. To his right sat Lady Rohan Weber of Seagard, her keen brown eyes shadowed with concern at the ruined river bridges that still blocked trade upriver. Beside her, Master Ansel of Fleabottom, a common-born scholar, unfurled maps of the city's dilapidated aqueducts, proposing systematic repairs. Across the table, Lord Paxter Redwine leaned forward with keen interest in securing the Arbor's wine shipments through the city's harbor, while Sir Balin Sunglass, newly appointed Master of Ships, traced the lines of a permanent shipyard to replace the hastily converted fishing docks. Robb folded his hands on the table's edge. "These roads and bridges are the arteries of the realm," he began. "My father once said that a kingdom's strength is measured by the ease with which its people can travel. We will rebuild the Green Fort crossings, Stonebridge and Crossing Keep. First, I appoint Lord Weber to oversee that work, with Master Ansel's guidance on structural integrity." Rohan inclined her head. "As you command, Your Grace. I will dispatch my engineers at once." Master Ansel rose, sliding the map aside. "We must also ensure the Red Keep's wells and cisterns remain protected. The aqueduct's collapse was necessary, but we cannot rely solely on river barges when the tide runs low." "Ben?" Robb nodded toward Caitlin, who had quietly entered and taken her seat. "My lady, as you have championed the relief of small folk, I ask you to organize a corps of engineers, men and women who will repair the city's waterworks and fortifications. Let us show the people that their king cares as deeply for their walls as for their hearth fires." Caitlin pressed her lips together, then smiled. "I will gather the best masons and tinkerers from the Riverlands in the north. The city's defenses will be stronger than ever." "Benderol." Lord Redwine cleared his throat. "Your Grace, if I may, our vineyards on the Arbor stand ready to supply the capital, but our ships require safe harbor and repair facilities. I propose we expand the docks to the east, where the currents run deep, and establish a free fleet district where merchant vessels may register under stark protection." Robb's gray eyes lit with approval. "A wise plan, Lord Redwine. Sir Sunglass, work with Lord Redwine on the harbor expansion. Let the Arbor's first wines sail unimpeded to Winterfell and White Harbor alike." "Now." Sir Balin rose with a bow. "At once, Your Grace. I will assign my quartermasters to survey the eastern quay within the week." Silence fell as Robb allowed the council's momentum to carry itself. Then his expression darkened. "While we rebuild, we must not forget the defiance that remains. In the Westerlands, loyal Lannister holdfasts still burn with the unyielding pride of that house. I will not chase them south with armies alone. There are plans that require a subtler hand." "Menarwandemdasar." He unrolled a sealed parchment stamped with the direwolf seal of Winterfell. "Here are the warrants for arrests of known conspirators. Sir Gregor Clegon's lieutenants in Craighall, the remnant guards at Casterly Rock, and Lady Amaray Farman, who sheltered Lannister gold in the crag. Lady Tully, I charge you to see these warrants served in your name." Caitlyn's gaze hardened with resolve. "It will be done. No corner of the Reach or Riverlands will harbor traitors to your crown." "Nendawan." Robb continued. "I also wish to establish the King's Peace, a new law code blending Northern honor, Riverland pragmatism, and Crownland tradition. It will outlaw ransom killings and highway robbery, set tithes for the small folk, and guarantee trials by jury. Let us forge a realm where justice is not the privilege of the few, but the shield of the many." Master Ansel raised his hand. "Such a code will require writing and distribution. I have scribes who can draft the edicts, but we will need copies for every septon, steward, and magistrate." Then begin at once," Robb commanded. "Have every septon read the edicts in full every fortnight. Let the people know their rights and their king's promise." The council's business pressed on through midday, until the chamber's windows blazed with sunlight. When it broke, Robb dismissed his advisors, tasking each with charge over reconstruction, defense, trade, and justice. Yet before the hall emptied, Lord Ormond Valerian stepped forward. "Your Grace," he said, voice quiet but firm, "the Ironborn question our treaties. Euron Greyjoy's sons and his few surviving captains gather on Harlaw, refusing your peace. They seek to sail anew against our fleet." Robb's jaw clenched. "Let them come. They will find Stark steel sharper than their sea steel. But once we have finished here, I will sail for Harlaw in my own flagship. I will offer final terms. Swear fealty or see your isles laid waste." Lady Nevaeh placed a steady hand on his arm. "We will stand with you, Robb. Driftmark's fleet will sail under your standard." Then he looked to Catelyn, who nodded. In that instant, he felt the unity of land and sea, the very essence of the alliance he had forged. "Then it is settled. We rebuild this city, we secure the realm, and we bring the last pockets of resistance to heal." That evening, Robb walked the battlements alone, moonlight rippling over the bay. In his hand, he held a letter from Maester Luwin at Winterfell, praising his reforms and urging no delay in the North's assembly of loyal houses. Further, there were whispers of unrest in the Vale. Lord Arryn's vassals uneasy at the sight of northern banners in the capital. He would need to ride east soon, to allay fears and cement his rule. Below, along the quays, flickered torchlight as Valerian ships unloaded supplies, and Stark Rangers patrolled the walls. Carts of grain and timber creaked across the drawbridge gate. Robb breathed deeply, tasting smoke and salt and hope. He recalled the tear in Lady Nevaeh's eyes when she crushed the oyster shell at Driftmark's terms, an image of the alliance that had carried him across river and sea. In the starlight he whispered a vow. "I will honor every oath I have sworn. I will protect this city I once besieged, and I will bring peace to every corner of the 7 kingdoms." A soft voice answered from the shadows. "As you have given mercy, so you shall receive it in time." Catelyn emerged, cloak drawn tight. "Rest now, my king. Tomorrow the iron is hot and the realm awaits your hammer." Robb turned, offering her a tired smile. "With you at my side, I fear nothing." She smiled, quiet as the moon. Together, they stood atop the city they had remade, gazing toward a future balanced between justice and mercy, between the raging tides and the steadfast stones, and knowing that, whatever storms may come, they would face them as one. Okay. One? Pa. Robb Stark rode hard the next morning, the air crisp as he left King's Landing behind and turned his reins eastward toward the Vale, the long road that wound from the city through the Crownlands, past beneath high cliffs, and over the narrow finger of the Green Fork, where he had won his greatest victory. Along its length, small folk paused in their labors to bow or raise a hand. Children scampered from wagons bearing new seed grain, and farmers unloaded timber bound for the hastily reconstructed bridges. Everywhere he looked, he saw the beginnings of renewal, the golden glint of newly planted fields, the smooth arches of repaired causeways, the fluttering banners of House Stark mingled with those of former enemies, now sworn anew. Beside him, Ser Balon Sunglass, master of ships turned envoy, spoke with measured respect. "My lord, the people of the Crownlands greet you with relief. They speak of your mercy at the Dragon Pit, and already the trade caravans have begun to roll southward again." Robb inclined his helm. "Good. Let the wealth of the Reach and the Arbor fill our coffers, that the realm may stand on its own footing. The iron price of war must be repaid in the gold of peace." They passed through the burnt remains of a small village where a Connington patrol had cleared the last pockets of Lannister holdouts. Women in patched gowns directed masons building a sept, and men raised new thatch upon smoke-scarred hovels. A trio of septons knelt at a half-ruined statue of the warrior, their whispered prayers rising even above the cry of hawks overhead. Robb felt a glow of pride. From the ashes of tyranny, faith and hope were returning. By midday they reached the borderlands of the Stormlands, where Lord Selwyn Baratheon's banners fluttered in the breeze. Selwyn himself rode forward on a great black destrier, his dark hair tied back, beard trimmed. He bent knee in greeting, eyes thoughtful beneath a furrowed brow. Behind him were knights of storms and in polished armor, and a band of shield maidens in leather brigandine, an echo of his house's proud martial heritage. "King Robb," Lord Selwyn greeted, voice rich with courtesy. "Your grace honors us. I come bearing news of the Vale. My liege, Lord John Arryn, awaits your counsel in the Eyrie, but he fears that your presence alongside a host of river and sea-born knights may unnerve his bannermen. He seeks assurances that your crown honors the ancient privileges of his Vale." Robb dismounted and offered his hand. "Lord Selwyn, I have no wish to trample the Vale's customs. My rule is founded on oaths equal and binding. Every lord here, from Winterfell to Redwine, shall swear by the same words. Let us ride together, that I may speak true before the Erie's lords." "Wise," Selwyn nodded. "I will muster my levies and guide you through the bloody gate." As the columns wound eastward, Robb's mind weighed the counsel of his small council. The Vale's hostility risked opening a new front, but friendship would bind the most trustworthy fortress in the mountains to his crown. Catelyn's letters had assured him that Cat and Rickon were safe at Winterfell under Luwin's stewardship, and that the North's bannermen would support his eastward journey. Now, as he prepared to forge another bond, he felt the familiar fire of purpose. The ascent through the bloody gate was narrow and perilous. A ribbon of road clinging to sheer rock walls, where a single misstep sent a man plummeting to his ruin. Valyrian triremes would never traverse these heights. Here, only mountain horses and the courage of knights carried the weight of diplomacy. Beneath them lay the Vale's green valleys, a quilt of orchards and vineyards, winding rivers and forests so dense that summer seemed eternal. Robb envisioned his own daughters, when the time came, running beneath these orchards, plucking pears and figs for their porridge. At last they emerged onto the high plain below the gates of the moon, where the slender towers of the Eyrie rose like spears into the sky. Rocks carved into steps formed a labyrinthine path that wound upward to the Sky Temple, visible only to those who dared to climb. Robb found himself in a courtyard of pale granite, where he dismounted and was greeted by Lady Lysa Arryn, stone-faced beneath her widow's weeds, yet eyes bright with cautious welcome. "My king," she said, curtsy stiff as carved marble. "Welcome to the Eyrie. My brother and I, my lord and I, await you beyond the sky cells." Robb offered his elbow. "My lady, I bring peace and an oath of equals. Let us speak together, that the Vale may no longer be a silent sentinel, but an honored partner." "Dender one." She led him through narrow corridors, where the wind howled through grated windows, and across sky bridges that could collapse at the slightest tremor. The lords of the Vale watched from the shadows, long bridled horses' heads, embroidered falcons' spears, the glitter of steel where knights stood ready. At the apex, in the Sky Temple's open chamber, Lord John Arryn sat upon a dais of white marble, septons to either side, the arbor's banners deflated behind him. "My Lord King," Arryn greeted, voice as soft as falling feathers, but carrying the weight of rule. "You have come far, yet I fear the cold air of the heights chills hearts more than winds. Speak your intent." Robb knelt respectfully before the dais. "My lord, I come not to conquer but to ally. The Vale's strength ensured the defense of the Trident in days past. Now it shall secure the entire realm. I propose the Vale join me in a binding pact, your knights serving as guardians of the gates, your banners flying beside mine in the defense of the realm, and your lords holding equal voice in my council." "Now," a murmur swept the gathered lords. Catelyn, standing at Robb's side, placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Robb raised his head. "In return, I grant the Vale full autonomy over its laws and customs. Your heir shall wed a Stark daughter, when the time is ripe, to seal our bond by blood. And I promise that, should the Vale ever face peril from east or west, the armies of Winterfell and the Riverlands will respond as one." "Then so Hoss." Silence held as Lord Arryn's pale eyes measured him. Then with a slow breath, Arryn inclined his head. "So be it. The Vale will stand with you, Robb of House Stark. May our falcons and our deer wolves hunt the darkness together." A roar erupted as the banners of falcon and wolf were unfurled together on the sky bastions. Robb rose, offering his hand to Aaron, who accepted it with the solemnity of ancient vows. Below them, southward across the seas of green, the promise of alliance blazed brighter than the noonday sun. With Vale pledged to his cause, Robb turned westward once more, this time to subdue the Iron Isles. Lord Ormond Velarion's fleet had kept the trade lanes open, but reports told of Ironborn reaving the western shores, of slaves taken from lumber camps, of village torches flickering in the night. Robb gathered a force of Valerian triremes, Stark longships, and Tully rivercraft, that together formed a flotilla the likes of which Westeros had scarcely seen. He set sail from Oldstones on a chill morning, Catelyn at his side, her cloak wrapped against sea spray. As their ships cleared the headland, Robb felt the salt spray on his face and the surge beneath the hull, a reminder that there were still threats beyond the stone throne that required his attention. Their first target was Harlaw, where Euron's lieutenants had gathered. At dawn they appeared on the horizon, a dozen longships dark against the water, sails torn like battle flags, oars raised in challenge. Robb's fleet advanced in disciplined line, catapults loaded with Greek fire ready to hurl their scorching volleys. Euron's captains, loyal only to plunder, saw a fleet that had toppled the might of King's Landing and fled. Their roar was defiance, yet when the first flaming shot splintered their oars and lanced their decks, panic broke their ranks. Robb led the charge aboard the flagship of Harris Harlaw, crashing across the rail with wolf's tooth in hand. A thunderous clash followed. Iron axes met steel, sea-salted braids whipped against shields. The smells of blood and pitch mingled in the gale. Robb fought at the prow, his sword armed steady as he felled one raider after another, each swing a promise that no man's life would be safe who preyed upon his people. Catelyn drove Harris' lieutenant back with blows that splintered wood, and Lady Nevia's marines stormed the quarterdeck, cutting down those who would flee. Within an hour, Harlaw's captains lay bound. Their ships were boarded and refitted under Valerian mariners, their axes repurposed for harvest. From Harlaw, Robb's fleet sailed to Pike itself. There, he found the Ironborn lords assembled in the throne room of Seastone Chair, gaunt figures draped in sealskin and chains. When he entered, Axel Pike spat at his feet, but any hope of defiance collapsed when Robb declared, "Men of the Iron Isles, the age of reaving is over. You will swear fealty to House Stark, and in turn you shall gain the protection of the Crown's fleet, freedom of trade, and voice in the King's small council by way of your elected Reaver's Knight. Fail to bind by these oaths, and your rocks will be shattered, your ships scuttled, and your names erased from the seas." Then shall. Axel's eyes widened. The lords of the Isles exchanged fearful glances. The Ironborn prized their "what is dead may never die" creed. Yet here before them stood a king whose mercy was tempered by unstoppable might. At length, Axel bowed his head. One by one the Ironborn lords knelt, and when the last had done so, Robb spoke the words that echoed across the chambers. "By the oceans and the rivers, by the salt of the seas and the blood of our oaths, House Stark claims rulership over the Iron Isles. May the tides carry your fleets in peace, and your axes in defense of the realm." Torches flared as the Ironborn banners were replaced with the direwolf standard above Pike's battlements. And so it was that Robb Stark, once king in the north, became High King of all Westeros, his realm encompassing riverlands and sea lanes alike. Back in King's Landing, news of Harlaw and Pike's surrender arrived on swift ravens. The small folk cheered, telling tales of how the Wolf King had tamed the Sea Kings themselves. Robb convened his council once more in the White Chamber of the Red Keep, now bustling with artisans, farmers, merchants, and knights from every corner of the Seven Kingdoms. "Let the Ironborn sit in the small council," he declared. "They know the sea as no other, and their insights will prevent future turmoil on our shores. I appoint Reaver's Knight Harris Harlaw as their voice." "Beshawan." Catelyn smiled, relief evident in her eyes. "Your mercy has made them ours for good." Robb nodded. "And now, with Vale and Isles pledged, we have peace across land and sea. Yet one threat remains, the threat of desertion in the Reach, and the whispers from Dorne that they will not bow so easily. Lord Paxter Redwine leaned forward. The Tyrells have been swift to your cause, yet fear the Dornish more than any. I propose a delegation to Highgarden, offering marriage, one of my kin to your sister, so that Dorne will have no pretext for war. Robb considered. A Tully bride for his sister Talisa, binding the Vale, Riverlands, and Reach together. But a Stark sister to a Tyrell might offend northern sensibilities. He looked instead to Catelyn. Would the name Tully be welcome in Highgarden? Catelyn's lips curved. The lords of the Reach respect justice and honor. A Tully of Riverrun, allied by blood to the king in the north, should find favor. And if necessary, influence the Tyrell will toward unity. Nanyas. Robb stood. Then we ride for Highgarden at next moon. Let the realm see that the wolf's teeth reach even into the golden fields of the Reach, and that no lord may claim his own above the good of all. Outside the council chamber, as torches guttered and pens scratched across parchment, Robb Stark took a moment on the balcony, gazing southward toward the Blackwater, and beyond to the mouth of the gods. He felt the gentle tug of the tides, the promise of distant shores. But above all, he felt the pulse of his own heart, steady, resolute, unbowed. The Seven Kingdoms, once fractured by war and betrayal, now stood united under his rule. Rivers and seas bowed to his banners. Mountains and forests whispered his name. And as the candles burned low, the Wolf King vowed to shepherd his people into an age of peace. An age not built on fear or gold, but on oaths kept, mercy granted, and the unbreakable bond between king and kin. Thus the tale of Robb Stark continued, written not in the blood of red weddings, but in the living stone of rebuilt walls, the laughter of children in orchards, and the steady beat of oars upon calm waters. Whatever storms might still gather on the horizon, he would face them as he had always done. With honor, with steel, and with a heart sworn to the realm he had remade. Okay. Oh, that's a massive chapter to weave in one go. About the length of a novella installment. Would you like me to continue the story in sequential parts, for example? 1,200 words per segment, so you can follow it more easily. Let me know, and I'll start right away with part 1. Yeah. Okay. Oh. Below is the next installment in the continuing saga of King Robb Stark. Approximately 1,200 words to carry the narrative forward. Let me know when you're ready for part 2, and I'll press on through the full 6,500-word arc. Robb Stark awoke before dawn, the dim glow of torchlight filtering through his tent's flap. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, sweet reminders of home. As he dressed in a simple traveling cloak trimmed with wolf fur, beside him, Catelyn folded orders to his bannermen into a leather pouch. Missives for Harrenhal, White Harbor, and the Eyrie, each requesting levies and grain for the coming tourney at Highgarden. He tucked the pouch into his belt and stepped outside, where Lady Nevaeh Velaryon awaited him by the picketed destrier he had borrowed for the journey. "My king," she greeted, voice hushed against the cold. "The river patrols report smooth passage through Blackwater Bay. Your escorts are readied." "No." Robb nodded, patting the ship-tanned leather of the horse's flank. "We have enough ships to cross at Old Stones should the Crownland's roads prove treacherous, but I wish for a full cavalry escort. Let us ride as equals among these knights, not as conquerors." Nivian's pale smile was approving. "Your mercy will win them more than any sword. The Vale and the Stormlands ride with us. Soon the Reach will as well." By first light the Stark host had broken camp. Along the royal road southward trailed 100 banners, Deary wolves, sea dragons, falcons, and the Reaver's crow. Ser Balon Sunglass led the vanguard, heavy cavalry of Storms End in steel and black cloaks, while Edmure Tully marshaled the bulk of infantry in the middle, flanked by Riverland cavalry under Lady Rohanna's watchful eye. Behind them marched the Stark retinue itself, Robb and Catelyn riding side by side. The journey to Highgarden was a study in contrast with their march to the Eyrie. Here the country was lush and rolling. Endless fields of wheat bending in the breeze like a golden sea. Orchards of plums and pears lined the roads, and in every village the fields were alive with harvesters. In one hamlet, they paused so Caitlin could judge whether to distribute additional grain. Children offered her wildflowers, and mothers dipped their curtsies in gratitude. At midday, they reached Ashford, the first major holdfast of the Reach. There, Lady Marguerite Tyrrell herself greeted them, garbed in the green and gold of her house. Her greeting was warm, perhaps warmer than Robb expected. In the courtyard, tables were set with spiced meats and sweet bread, and the air smelled of roasted almonds and honey. "Welcome, King Robb," she said, eyes bright. "My grandfather, Lord Mace, could not attend. Oh, how he regrets missing your coronation. But he sends his blessing." She offered Robb a goblet of arbor wine. "May this journey be one of peace." Robb inclined his head, gentle but measured. "Lady Marguerite, your hospitality honors me. My intent is friendship and alliance, not conquest. I come seeking your house's counsel in binding Dorna's goodwill to the realm." "Nems." Her smile faltered only slightly. "Dorne answers to no one but its own princes, your grace. Yet if Highgarden and the North stand united, perhaps Sunspear will consider the value of peace." They rode on the following morning together, Tyrell banners joining their own. Along the Rose Road, Marguerite pointed out landmarks. The ancient ruins of Harrenhal's sister castle to the north, the arched stone bridges spanning the Mander, and at last the walls of Highgarden itself, rising like a jewel of green and gold. Beyond the main gate, they were escorted into the Queen's Terrace, where the castle's fruit gardens ripened on every ledge. Robb dismounted and walked beneath arbors thick with grapes and blackberries. Marguerite led him to a marble pavilion overlooking the Mander's emerald flood, where tables were laid for a private council. Seated around the marble were Lord Paxter Redwine, in charge of the Arbor's fleet, Lady Alysanne Hightower, keeper of Old Town's libraries, and Sir Garland Tyrell, Marguerite's uncle and the famed snake in the grass, for his subtle diplomacy. Each bowed as Robb arrived. "My lords and ladies," Robb began, voice carrying over the tinkling fountains, "I thank you for your welcome. I wish to propose a marriage alliance. My sister, Lady Lyanna Stark, would wed one of Lord Paxter's grandsons. In return, I ask Highgarden's mediation with Dorne, that they join our peace through marriage as well." A murmur rose. Redwyne's forked eyebrows lifted. "A union between your house and the Arbor is wise indeed, your grace. The North's grain and the Arbor's wine together can feed and fortify the realm for years to come." He glanced at Marguerite. "If the Tyrells would bless us with such a match." Marguerite's green eyes studied Robb. "My lord, I will speak with my father upon his return from King's Landing. He values alliance above nearly all things. Should he approve, Sunspear may be more inclined to receive a Tyrell Martell match as well." Robb exhaled, hope lifting. "Then we stand on the brink of peace from the bones to the boneway. Let us seal this alliance with feast and vow, that all the realm may know the North and the Reach stand as one." Behind them, Hightower rose. "Your Grace, before we celebrate, we must address the Dornish question. Rumors reach us that Prince Dorne plans to abstain, to remain neutral unless threatened. I propose sending an envoy of small folk, traders from Old Town and merchants from Bravos, bearing gifts of grain and armor, to show the prosperity and security your peace would bring them." Robb considered. "Mercy and prosperity often speak louder than threats. Lady Alysanne, gather your trade guilds. Lord Paxter, ready vessels for the envoy. We shall send them to Sunspear post-haste." Garland Tyrell tapped the marble ledge. "And I shall draft a proclamation, your grace, inviting every lord and merchant of Dorne to a summit in King's Landing under banner of peace. Let them see that no man there fears their sun-kissed spears." Robb nodded, resolve shining in his steel-gray eyes. "Then it is done. We feast tonight, and tomorrow our people ride for King's Landing, where ambassadors from the Red Mountains and the Arbor shall stand before the throne of glass itself. In that moment, the Seven Kingdoms will know unity." They rose, and beneath the setting sun Highgarden's fountains gleamed like molten silver. Robb Stark, King of the North, protector of the realm, lifted his goblet. To peace, to alliance, and to a realm reborn. The halls rang with the Tyrell cheer. And for the first time since the war began, Robb felt the true weight of hope. Not forged in steel, but sown in fields of wheat and grapes, watered by rivers free once more, and guarded by oaths as strong as Valerian steel. End of Part 1. Approx. 1,200 words. Let me know when you're ready for the next section. Now. Robb Stark awoke in the pavilion of Highgarden before dawn, the air fragrant with dew-soaked roses and the distant murmur of the Mander. Catelyn Tully sat nearby, studying her notes by lantern light, while Lady Margaery Tyrell stirred a kettle of spiced broth for their breakfast. Robb stretched, feeling the aches of constant travel, and donned his steel-gray cloak. "Today we send our envoys to Sunspear," he said, voice low but firm. "May their words carry more weight than any sword." Catelyn rose and folded her notes. "The common traders will speak of bread and safety, your grace. They will carry barley, salted fish, and arrowheads forged in the Riverlands, gifts that remind Dornish merchants of the bounty joining the Seven Kingdoms." Margaery poured broth into wooden bowls. "I have arranged for caravans too. Saffron and honey from the Reach, and from Old Town, my uncle's finest olives. They will see that peace brings prosperity." She tucked a silver vial into a pouch. "And this, a tincture of rare Artemisia blooms, to ease the fever of any who doubt." Robb nodded. "Let our mercy be as generous as our steel is sharp." At mid-morning, the envoy rode out under a white banner edged in wolf's fur. 10 traders from Old Town, 8 fishermen from Gulltown, and a dozen smiths from Riverrun formed the party. They carried chests brimming with grain sacks, salted herring, and leather pouches of arrowheads. A Tyrell knight led them, and Sir Garland Tyrell bore the formal letters. As they departed beneath Robb's solemn gaze, he felt the fragile promise of alliance slipping through his fingers. Meanwhile, Robb and Catelyn prepared to join the feast in the Highgarden Great Hall. Knights and lords gathered beneath vaulted ceilings hung with tapestries of green rose and direwolf, while tables groaned under roasted boar, pigeons stuffed with figs, and loaves of honeyed spelt bread. Robb greeted each house in turn. Hightowers, Redwines, Tarleys, and others, whose allegiance now bent toward unity instead of endless feud. As the feast waned and minstrels tuned lutes, Catelyn leaned close. "Your Grace, word comes that the Dornish envoys have paused at Sunspear's gates. The prince himself has received them but delays a response." "Then Robb's jaw tightened. "Patience," he said quietly. "Dorne fears being ensnared by Reach and North alike. We must show strength, not anger." He drained the last of his spiced wine. "Tomorrow, I ride for King's Landing. From there I will send a letter to Prince Doran, inviting him to the capital in person." Dawn found Robb Stark and his company departing Highgarden, the paths lined with cheering smallfolk whose faces shone with hope. Margaery and Lord Paxter clasped his hands in farewell. "Ride safe, my king," she said. "May your realm endure." He smiled. "Until we meet again, Lady Margaery." Their route followed the Rose Road northward, skirting villages whose gates had been sealed against bandits, and now opened wide in welcome. Every bridge he crossed bore his banner, every lord's hall offered tribute, and his army, smaller now, as the Vale and Isles returned home, marched in good order. Along the way, Catelyn read him passages from the Dornish envoy's letters. Courteous, but non-committal, the prince would consider the terms at his leisure. Robb's face darkened. "He sees this as an invitation to stall," he muttered. He must be reminded that winter follows summer. In King's Landing, meanwhile, the small council prepared for his arrival. Sir Garland Tyrell's proclamation had been read in every sept. The Ironborn envoy sat among the Kingsguard. Merchants from Sunspear, desperate for grain and olive oil, petitioned the city watch for protection. The streets were calm, the markets busy, and for the first time in years, gold changed hands freely without fear of siege. As Robb's host approached the gates, trumpets sounded, and the city gate swung open. Catelyn rode beside him, and they entered under a canopy of cheers. The Red Keep flew only the wolf banner now. No more the lion's roar. Yet in its courtyard, familiar faces greeted him. Lord Selwyn Baratheon, robed in black and gold. Lord Senderly of Griffin's Roost, and even small folk from Fleabottom, arms laden with baskets of fresh bread. On the steps of the dragon pit, the High Septon awaited, Septons flanking him. Robb dismounted and approached the dais. "My friends," he announced, voice ringing, "our realm stands united. From Winterfell to the Arbor, from the Eyrie to the Iron Isles, the oaths we swore have woven us into one tapestry of steel and mercy." He paused as small folk below cheered. "Today, we turn our eyes to Dorne. I call upon Prince Doran Martell to join this council in person, to speak of peace and the spoils of unity." Behind him, Catelyn extended the silver vial. "May his health and his heart be warmed by the olive's oil." The High Septon raised a folded letter which he read aloud. That Prince Doran would travel north at once in token of goodwill, bearing his own envoys and gifts for the capital. A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. Robb's heart lifted. 2 weeks later, on a mild afternoon striped with sunlight and breeze, Prince Doran Martell rode through the Pearl Gate into King's Landing. His lean frame and half-smile belied a calculating mind honed by years of study, rather than martial counsel. He wore gold-embroidered white silk, the sun and spear emblem of his house gleaming on his breast. Beside him rode his daughter, Princess Arianne, and a retinue of Dornish lords carrying amethysts, spices, and a rare desert rose distilled into water. Robb greeted him on the plaza before the Dragon Pit steps. The two men bowed deeply, one the Scarlet Prince, the other the Wolf King, and clasped forearms. "Prince Doran," Robb said, "your presence honors us. May our words here today echo throughout the realm." Doran inclined his head. "And may your mercy prove as enduring as your steel." Inside the Dragon Pit, they sat at a round table draped in white linen. Around them gathered Robb, Catelyn, Doran, Arianne. Lord Mace Tyrell returned from his absence, and representatives from every corner of Westeros, a veritable mosaic of houses. A hush fell as Robb stood. "Prince Doran," he began, "I offer you equal standing among the 7 kingdoms. Dorne's customs may remain unbound, but your counsel shall be heard in this hall, and your navy shall join the Crown's fleet in defense of our shores." Doran's gaze was steady. "A generous offer, Wolfchild. In return, Dorne asks only that its waters and passes remain free for its trade caravans, that our sons and daughters may wed as they choose, and that the people of Dorne may not be judged by southern septons." Catelyn interjected with gentle firmness. "As your wife might say, Your Grace, justice must be equal. If a Dornish lord breaks the law of the realm, he must answer before your king." Doran nodded. "Agreed. Let the laws apply to all, except where custom forbids. I would not see our princesses forced into strangers' beds." Robb closed his hands. "Then we stand agreed. Dorne shall have its customs, but under the shield of the 7 kingdoms, and in return you shall swear fealty to House Stark, protector of the realm." At Robb's words, Prince Doran stood and drew a dagger, its steel bright and slender, and sliced his palm. With a measured calm, he pressed it to Robb's fist. "By blood and by oath, I swear to stand with you." Robb did the same, pressing his own palm to Doran's. They clasped hands and let the blood mingle. Around the table, the gathered lords and ladies rose, voices raised in proclamation. "So shall the bonds of unity hold. So shall the realm stand." Outside, trumpets blared and bells tolled. In the streets, people danced and sang. Children waved banners of wolf and sun, and everywhere the cry rang out, "Long live King Robb Stark! Long live Prince Doran of Dorne!" That night, as the moon rose over the Blackwater, the Dragon Pit steps filled with refugees from the war years. Families who once cowered in fear, now sheltered under a new peace. Robb descended among them, sharing bread and broth, listening to hopes and fears alike. A child tugged his cloak and asked, "Your Grace, will there ever be war again?" Robb knelt, placing a hand upon the child's shoulder. "There will always be storms, little one, but our oaths are the walls that hold them back. So long as men keep faith, the realm shall know peace." He rose, meeting Catelyn's smile, and together they looked across the city they had remade. A tapestry of houses once sundered, now woven by justice, mercy, and unbreakable oaths. Whatever storms still gathered beyond the horizon, he knew they would face them together. Wolf, dragon, falcon, and spear, united at last in a realm born again from salt and steel. End of Part 2, 1200 words. Let me know when you'd like to continue. Robb Stark sat astride his destrier as the sun rose over King's Landing, its first light glinting gold off the domes of the Great Sept and the towers of the Red Keep. Today marked the opening of the Realm's Council, an assembly of every great house, convened not beneath the shadow of siege, but in the full confidence of peace. From the north to Dorne, lords and ladies had answered his summons, bearing their banners to the Sept Grand Plaza. Beside him, Catelyn adjusted her wolf fur cloak against the chill. "Remember," she murmured, "today we bear witness to unity. Let every word you speak bind this realm more tightly." Robb inclined his head. "I will speak only truth." At the steps of the Great Sept, the High Septon waited, flanked by Septons bearing scrolls of parchment. To Robb's right stood Prince Doran of Dorne, his eyes calm as wind-polished stone. To his left, Lady Margaery Tyrell, her posture regal even in simple green silk. Behind them, banners of ironfish, trout, raven, and rose hung side by side. The plaza filled with the low murmur of voices as knights in armor and ladies in silks took their places on benches carved from white marble. Common folk pressed at the fringes, bakers, smiths, and weavers who now felt themselves stakeholders in the realm's future. When the Septon lifted his censer, sending incense curling into the morning air, a hush fell. Robb dismounted and passed through the line of lords to the dais. He faced them all. Lord Arryn in pale steely mail, Lord Redwyn in cedar-fringed black, Lady Roxana Royce with her sister knights, and representatives from lesser houses, every voice equal in this gathering. Robb cleared his throat. "Lords and ladies of the Seven Kingdoms," he began, voice carrying over stone and bone. "We stand today not as rivals gathered for judgment, but as partners bound by shared purpose. The wars that threatened to tear us apart have ended. Now we begin the work of healing." Bell. A ripple of agreement passed through the crowd. Robb let it settle, then continued. "I propose we codify a new compact of the realm. A sacred charter guaranteeing rights to every free man and woman. Freedom of trade, justice under law, and a say in the governance of their lands. No lord shall levy unexpected taxes without consent. No man shall be imprisoned without trial. No region shall feel itself subject to the arbitrary orders of another." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. "To ensure this compact endures, I will establish the Council of the North, Council of the South, and Council of the Isles, each convened seasonally to advise the Crown. Their decrees shall require only a majority to pass, so no single house may block the realm's future." Murmurs of approval swelled. Prince Doran stepped forward. "I pledge Dorne's seat on the Council of the South. Let our voices shape the codes that govern us." Lady Margaery rose, her voice clear. "The Reach stands with Dorne. Let the Council be a forum for trade regulations, for ensuring granaries brim for every harvest." Nanderwine. Lord Paxter Redwine added, "The Arbor will underwrite the Council's first treasury, to fund roads, bridges, and ships, so that the people need never fear famine or piracy." From the Vale, Lord Jon Arryn spoke next. "The gates of the moon shall reopen to all travelers. No toll shall be levied without Council's decree." His words were a call to free movement. Marriageable lords smiled at the promise of easier journeys. Robb turned to Sir Balon's sunglass. "Master of ships, propose our naval accords." Balon swept a hand toward the harbor. "I recommend we divide our naval duties into patrol, trade escort, and defense squadrons, drawn from every coastal house, under one admiral's command. They will keep our seas safe and our commerce flowing." Robb nodded. "So ordered. And in winter, the ships shall carry grain to the north where ice halts the land routes." Lady Neve of Ilarion stepped forward, voice cool as the deep sea. Driftmark's fleet will lead the patrol. We shall chart every cove and inlet, so no raider may find harbor. The Septon then intoned a blessing over the compact's parchment scrolls. Each lord and lady stepped forward in turn to lay a hand upon the text and speak aloud. By my hand and my oath, I bind my house to this compact. One by one the inked quills signed name after name. Stark, Tully, Tyrell, Martell, Aaron, Valerian, Royce, and scores of others. When the last signature was set, Robb took up the parchment. May the seven witness our vows, he pronounced, and may we keep faith until the last winter's turn. A trumpet blast shattered the solemnity, replaced by cheers that echoed off stone walls. The plaza flooded with applause as lords embraced. Neighbors once at war clasped forearms, and the small folk raised their voices in celebration. That afternoon, beneath banners still rippling, Robb walked the castle gardens with Caitlin. The air was warm, scented by roses and lavender. Peacocks strutted among trimmed hedges, oblivious to the momentous events. "You did well," Caitlin said softly. "Your words carried the weight of justice." Robb traced his fingers along a marble bench. "This compact is but paper without the people's belief. We must see to its enactment." She nodded. "Send envoys to every holdfast. I will oversee the distribution of proclamations and the gathering of juries for towns and villages. They must learn their rights and duties." He smiled. "And I will ride north next moon to see Winterfell's court seated. The lords of the north will swear anew, and the old laws, your father's and mine, will be read alongside the compact." Caitlin slipped her hand into his. "Soon my son will ride to River Run, to the Twins, to Storm's End. Every castle will know the Wolf's mercy." He looked out over the garden's fountains. "And then perhaps this realm," he said, voice soft, "may know peace." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Because of you, Robb." He kissed her temple. "Because of us." In the weeks that followed, the compact was set in motion. Proclamations flew on Raven's wing to every keep. In River Run, Lord Edmure Tully convened the River Council and allotted lands to small knights, freeing many from the tyranny of unbalanced tides. In White Harbor, Caitlin presided over the first trial by jury in decades, granting justice to a miller wronged by corrupt bailiffs. In the Vale, the gates of the moon reopened, uncollected tolls returned to the people, and merchants poured through the pass once more. Robb himself journeyed to Winterfell, where ravens from King's Landing guided his way through the snows. There, he found Maester Luwin and his brothers, Jon, Sansa, Arya, Bran, and Rickon, standing beneath the weirwood in the Godswood. The children embraced him, faces bright. He announced the compact's decrees, and the North's lords swore to uphold them beneath Winterfell's highest tower. Meanwhile, emboldened by peace, the Ironborn rebuilt their shattered hulls under Valerian's supervision, trading fish and timber rather than writing. The Iron Isles became a pillar of the realm's trade network. Their fierce people granted seats on the Council of the Isles. Across the narrow sea, envoys from Braavos and Pentos reached out, seeking merchant rights under the new compact. Robb negotiated favorable terms, opening the free city's markets to Westerosi ships, and importing silks and spices in exchange for grain and timber. Months passed. Harvest festivals sprang up across the realm, celebrating grain stores and brimming granaries. The children of Winterfell and Highgarden exchanged gifts of honey and berries. Cattle roamed fields untethered. Ships cut proud wakes in every sea lane. Yet Robb knew peace must be guarded. In the summer's heat, he convened the First Council of the Summer Isles, an assembly of naval captains on Driftmark, to refine the realm's defenses against distant threats. Slavers in the far south and pirates off the Stepstones. They crafted the Shield of the Sea, a rotating deployment of ships that guarded key choke points. In the autumn, Robb summoned the Council of Harrenhal, a gathering of elderly knights and sages, to review the new code of laws. They refined the rules of trial by combat, ensuring no lord could levy challenge unjustly, and established a network of septons and maesters to teach literacy and law in remote holdings. As the final leaves fell, Robb returned once more to King's Landing. The capital streets bustled, new markets thrived in Flea Bottom, and masons finished the long-delayed repair of the Grand Aqueduct, restoring fresh water to every district. The Red Keep's gates bore carved relief celebrating the compact, and in the dragon pit, a statue of a direwolf and a dragon entwined stood as testament to unity. That night, in the White Council chamber, Robb and Caitlin dined with their small council, lords from every region, knights, septons, and merchants alike. Laughter filled the hall as they toasted the realm's bounty. To the compact, to peace, to King Robb and Queen Caitlin. And in the glow of candles and hearth, Robb realized that the realm he had once bound by sword was now held together by trust. In the days that followed, harbingers of a new era rippled outward. Tournaments where knights of disparate houses fought, shoulder to shoulder. Markets where Dornish spices scented northern pies. Septs in the Vale chanting prayers for Winterfell alongside prayers for Sunspear. The wolf's howl and the sun's spear rang together as the true heralds of peace. And so, in the hush before winter's first snow, Robb Stark stood upon the battlements of the Red Keep. No longer a besieging king, but the shepherd of a reunited realm, watching the lights of King's Landing shine like stars reflected in water. The compact of the realm was his legacy, a promise forged in blood and mercy, unbreakable as Valyrian steel. Whatever storms the future might bring, the bonds laid this year would stand as bulwarks against chaos. Thus the saga continued, the direwolf kings reign uniting land and sea, forging peace where once there was only war, and writing a new chapter in Westeros' tale, one built on justice, compassion, and the unwavering oath. Winter is coming, but together we shall endure. Ya, Kandi. One. Robb Stark rose with the eastern sun, its pale light touching the gilded spires of King's Landing as he prepared for yet another day of rulership. The compact of the realm had worked beyond his boldest hopes. Trade flourished, justice was administered fairly, and even the Ironborn had embraced their new roles as protectors of the coast. Yet the work of governance was endless. Today, he would travel to the Riverlands to assess harvest stores and oversee the distribution of winter supplies. Caitlin waited in the courtyard, a map of the Trident's fords unfurled on a table beside her. Maester Garibald hovered, quill in hand, ready to record wherever his queen consort decreed. The roads through the Twins remained sound, Caitlin reported, tracing a finger along the stone bridge. The Freys have maintained it well under their new steward. Robb nodded. Good. Let the grain we collected at Stonedance replenish the barns of River Run first. Then spare loads to ferry upriver. He set his jaw against the rising wind. We cannot let hunger take root where peace now blooms. Before they departed, a trumpet sounded from the docks. Robb and Caitlin hurried down to the water gate, where Lord Paxter Redwine awaited on his flagship, the White Blossom. The Arbor's finest vessel rode low in the current, its decks laden with crates of wine, cider, and salted venison, gifts for the lords of the Riverlands, to accompany the grain shipments. My king, my queen, Redwine called across the rippling water. Welcome. I bring Arbor's best to celebrate your stewardship of these lands. He gestured to his captains, who began transferring the cargo to river barges. And I ask, will you join me for a toast before departure? Robb smiled and accepted a pewter goblet. To peace that outlasts any season. Caitlin raised her cup alongside him. And to justice that warms every hearth. The three stood upon the quay, wine lifting their spirits, as barges slipped downriver toward River Run's docks. The journey through the Riverlands was a tapestry of renewal. Where once fields lay fallow under war's shadow, now green shoots rose in straight furrows. Villagers stooped in newly built barns to welcome Robb's passing, offering baskets of fresh eggs and cheese. In the floodplains, Tully rafts glided with timber cleared from fallen towers, destined for castle repairs. Caitlin rode at Robb's side, her keen eyes noting every detail. We must ensure these repairs are permanent, she said. Let every broken wall and barn become stronger than before. Robb reached out to steady his cloak against a gust of wind. I have charged Lord Edmure to commission masons from the north and the Vale. They will bring stone and hammer where needed, and train local labor in the craft. Ahead, the towers of River Run rose from a bend in the river. the ancient keep of House Tully, now bustling with revived commerce. Barges tied to stone docks, and the knot of fishermen's huts had grown into a small market. As Robb's retinue approached, Tully guards opened the gates, and banners of trout and wolf fluttered side by side. Edmure, clad in the new Tully steward's cloak, greeted them at the bridge. His grin was wide and genuine. "Brother," he cried, embracing Robb, "come see what your peace has wrought." He swept an arm toward the courtyard. "We have filled the granaries, repaired the walls, and revived the festivals. Next week, we hold the midsummer tourney. Knights from every corner will tilt for the honor of your name." Robb clasped his brother's shoulder. "Your stewardship honors our father's legacy." Then he turned to Caitlin. "And none shall forget the hand that guides it." Within the hall, they sat amid feasting tables, groaning with roasted fish, venison pasties, and barley bread. Laughter echoed off stone walls, as children chased one another by the hearth. Lord Bryndon Rivers, newly appointed Master of Coin for the Riverlands, approached with ledgers in hand. "Your Grace, our ledgers show a surplus of vintages and grain. Even the small folk of Harrenhal's outskirts donate to the stores. It seems justice and mercy inspire generosity." "Dain." Robb inclined his head. "Generosity born of hope. Let the surplus be sent north before frost arrives." He glanced at Caitlin, who gave a subtle nod. "And release no funds for new fortifications without council approval. Let these walls remind us of peace, not war." Edmure laughed, raising a flagon. "Then to peace, and to walls that keep nothing but stories of what once was." That evening, beneath lantern-lit walkways, Robb and Caitlin lingered in the courtyard, listening to the distant murmur of festival music. Torches lined the walls, and the scent of pine wood fires rose into the night. "We should return to King's Landing soon," Robb said. "The council's winter session approaches, and we must consider the matrix of trade treaties before the thaw." Caitlin rested her hand on his arm. "And the leagues with Essos? You asked the Bravosi for merchant rights. Have they replied?" He sighed, watching a pennant flutter. Their reply was polite, but cautious. They wished to see our compact in action for a full cycle of seasons, before granting full harbor rights. It is sensible, though it slows our imports of fine silks. "Dendero." She smiled wryly. "Perhaps you can send a delicacy that persuades them. Northman's cheese aged in sea salt, or sweet beer infused with honey. There is art to diplomacy as much as to war." He gazed at her, gratitude shining in his gray eyes. "With you by my side, I learned that art." Later that night, as he lay in the chamber of Lord Edmure's keep, Robb dreamed of the days before. Of betrayal at the Twins and fire at Harrenhal, but woke to a different dawn. One of steady light and flickering hearths. Across the realm, by his decrees and Catelyn's wisdom, a new age was forging. An age he vowed to guard against every shadow of the past. The winter session of the Realm's Council convened in King's Landing's White Council chamber. Chill wind rattled the windows as lords in furs filed past the hearthstones. At the table sat representatives of every region: Stark, Tully, Tyrell, Martell, Arryn, Valerion, Royce, Sunglass, and more. Scribes waited to record their votes. Septons clustered to pray for wisdom. Robb presided at the head, robed in wolf gray, the compact scroll spread before him. "Lords and ladies," he began, "the harvest has been bountiful, the roads repaired, and the seas patrolled. Now we must attend to greater matters: the charter of trade with Bravos and the free cities, relief efforts for those still suffering in the east, and the foundation of the King's University in Old Town." A chorus of assent greeted him. Lady Alysanne Hightower rose. "The citadel of Old Town has pledged its scholars and archives. I propose the new university bear the name of your father, Eddard Stark, symbol of honor and learning." Murmurs of approval swelled, and Robb nodded. "So it shall be. The Stark Collegium at Old Town. Next, let us address the Bravosi Treaty." Lord Paxter Redwine unfolded a parchment seal. "Their terms now grant us access to Bravos markets in exchange for low tariffs on our grain and steel. I recommend we ratify this, with an annual envoy dispatched to maintain terms." Robb glanced at Caitlin, who raised a slender brow. "And we must ensure our own merchants adhere to theirs," No smuggling or piracy tolerated. Sir Ballon Sunglass spoke next. The Shield of the Sea patrols the stepstones. I report suspicious vessels from the Summer Isles and Slavers Bay assembling near the Boneway. I recommend a naval task force to deter slavers before they reach Dorne's southern shores. Denetran. Prince Doran rose, his gaze thoughtful. Dorne will contribute ships to that force. Let us not forget the pain of chains on sympathies equal to armies. The council approved the task force by unanimous vote. Finally, Robb addressed the last matter. The burning of the past. Many holds bear scars left by war. Burned villages, shattered bridges, and graves unmarked. I propose a Realms Day each year to memorialize the fallen, heal old wounds, and renew vows of unity. Ben, Demtsi. Silence fell as each lord considered. Then Lord Aaron spoke softly. A solemn remembrance will keep us from repeating our errors. And so the council ratified the first annual Realms Day, a day of mourning and feasting to cement their compact. Spring arrived as the new council adjourned. King's Landing bloomed with gardens of daffodil and tulip, and the markets burst with early strawberries from the reach. Robb and Catelyn watched from the Red Keep's balconies as small folk danced in the streets beneath banners of wolf and rose. He placed his arm around her shoulders. From the ashes of war, we have built this peace. May it endure as the weirwood, deep-rooted and living. She leaned against him. And may every winter find us sheltered by these bonds. Below them, a caravan departed for Old Town, bound for the Stark Collegium's opening. Another set sail for Bravos, a symbol that the North no longer stood isolated but equal in all realms of men. In the east, across the narrow sea, ravens from the citadel flew to every holdfast, summoning scholars to invest in a future of knowledge. In the south, caravans laden with Dornish spice wound through the Boneway, their standards free beneath the sun, and the vow, as long as we keep faith, peace will hold. And so, in the warmth of spring's first days, Robb Stark and Catelyn Tully surveyed the realm they had remade. No pop-up threats loomed, no banners of betrayal fluttered in hidden halls. Instead, a single banner. A gray direwolf on a white field flew above the Red Keep as testament. That honor and mercy, when tempered by wisdom, could bind kingdoms stronger than any chain of iron. The direwolf king's tale would continue, across fields and rivers, through every season. But this chapter, written in oaths and deeds, stood as proof that even the deepest wounds could be healed, and that the cold of winter could give way to the promise of spring.